The concept of inheritance is classified into two types named Mendelian inheritance and Non-Mendelian inheritance. The genetic traits that follow the principles of Mendel's law are known as Mendelian inheritance, while the genetic traits that do not follow the Mendel's law are known as Non-Mendelian inheritance. But before we start, let me introduce to you who is the father of genetics. His name is Gregor Mendel. It says here that he loves to read especially about natural sciences and was aware of Darwin's findings. He was raised on a farm. That's why he understood the value of plant breeding. And at the age of 21, did you know that he entered priesthood and studied plant breeding in a monastery in the Czech Republic? He studied the inheritance of traits in plants. That's why they call him the father of genetics. Also, he studied traits that occur in distinct forms. He developed through breeding varieties. He used mathematical analysis in his studies. When he bred amongst themselves, these plants produced offspring identical to the parent for that trait, as you can see in the picture. The next one is the gametes. Gametes is a mature haploid male or female germ cell which is able to unite with another of the opposite sex in sexual reproduction to form a zygote. It also says here that it is a reproductive cells produced by sexually reproducing organisms, as what I've said earlier. And there are two types of gametes. The first one is the male gametes, which is the sperm. The second one is the female gametes, which is eggs. And in plants, male gametes contain in pollen, while in ovules contain in carpels. The next one is the fertilization. Fertilization, it says here that it is a fusion of egg and sperm. We have these two types of fertilization. The first one is self-fertilized. When we say self-fertilized, it is a fusion of sperm and egg from same plant. While cross-fertilized, which is the second type of fertilization, it is a fusion of egg and sperm from two different plants. So we have here the process of pea plants, as you can see in the picture. Let's discuss about the Mendel's interpretations. It says here that when it comes to genes, the hereditary information that determines a single trait, and in alleles, it alternate forms of a gene. Did you know that when an organism inherits two identical alleles for a trait, organism is said to be a homozygous for the trait? While when an organism inherits two different alleles for one trait, the organism is called heterozygous for the trait. Why were all the seeds in the F1 generation round? Dominant versus recessive allele. Now let's define the dominant. An allele that is expressed whenever it is present, while the recessive is an allele that is masked whenever the dominant allele is present. Now we have here the definition of genotype and phenotype. When we say genotype, it's a genetic makeup of an individual. It is determined by the alleles present for each trait. While phenotype, physical appearance of a trait, it is the expression of genotype. Let's take a look on the picture below. The mother is in the left side and the father is on the right side, while their son is in the middle. As you can see, the son inherits from both of his parents, the shape of his face, eyes, nose, and his eye color. Genotype is the hereditary information of the organism in the form of gene in the DNA and remains the same throughout the life. While phenotype, it may change significantly throughout the life of an individual because of environmental changes and the psychological and morphological changes associated with aging. Using Punnett squares to predict the inheritance of sickle cell anemia. So now let's discuss what is sickle cell anemia. It says here that it is due to presence of recessive allele denoted by HBS, causes distortion of red blood cells into long, thin sickles. It also causes pain, tissue damage, and cells to rupture prematurely. The carriers of this are heterozygous genotypes and do not manifest as symptoms. That's the meaning of sickle cell anemia. Here is an example of Punnett squares used to predict possible offspring genotypes. Place alleles for each parent on each side. As you can see, the mother's genotype and father's genotype. Now we have here the predict inheritance. In the picture, the given parents' genotypes, it says here that you can predict offspring's genotypes and phenotypes. So both HBS or heterozygous and homozygous dominant are normal. Here's another picture. Now let's go to the Mendel's law. The first one is the law of segregation. A parent contributes only one of its alleles for a trait to each offspring. If parent is heterozygous for a trait, the particular allele donated to the offspring is random. It applies to the inheritance of two or more genes simultaneously. That's the law of segregation. Well, the second one is the law of independence assortment. It says here that alleles of one gene are passed to offspring independently of the alleles of another or other genes. So this is the dihybrid cross. A fertilization in which the parents differ in two distinct traits or characteristics. As you can see in the picture, that's the example of dihybrid cross. Another example in male gametes. So now let's go to the non-Mendelian inheritance. Some traits don't follow the simple dominant or recessive rules that Mendel first applied to genetics. Some alleles are neither dominant nor recessive. That's the meaning. Traits can be controlled by more than one gene. So we have here the incomplete dominance. When we say incomplete dominance, the heterozygous phenotype is a blending of the two homozygous phenotypes. Meaning, one allele is not completely dominant over another. As you can see, we have here the white flower and the red flower, and when we combine them, nag-blend siya into a pink flower. That's the incomplete dominance. One allele is not completely dominant over another. So, anong pinagkaiba nito sa codominance? When we say codominance, for example, the cow in the picture, we have here the red and white. And when it blends, hindi siya nagbe-blend. Nagkakaroon siya ng color na row na white with red spots, not pink. Because when we say codominance, two alleles are both expressed as a dominant phenotype. Next one is multiple allele series. Codominance, more than two choices of alleles are present for a trait. ABO blood type has 3 alleles. ABO blood types, if A and B are present, type A and B is also present. Neither is recessive. Individuals can be type A, B, or O. It's recessive. So next one is the sex linkage inheritance. In males, they have X and Y chromosomes, while in females, they have 2 X chromosomes. The X chromosome is these chromosomes determine sex, so genes located on these chromosomes are known as sex linkage genes. So the X chromosome is much larger than the Y, so it carries more genes than the Y chromosome. These orders that are sex-linked are much more common in males because they would only need one recessive allele to have the trait, rather than the two recessive alleles the females need. So let us not forget that the main difference between Mendelian and non-Mendelian inheritance is that Mendelian inheritance describes the determination of traits by means of dominant and recessive alleles of a particular gene, whereas non-Mendelian inheritance describes the inheritance of traits which does not follow Mendelian law.